Good morning. The title of the sermon: God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean. The book of Acts is one of the most surprising books in the entire Bible. It is written as a historical account of the early church by Luke, the person generally believed to be the writer of the third gospel, which bears his name. Yet it chronicles the history of the Christianity growing from a small Jewish sect into a faith that is available to all human beings. It is doing far more than just recording the past, however. It creates the prologue for all that is to follow. There are three huge bombshells in the book of Acts. In the 6th chapter, the church begins to include Greek-speaking Jews. They're referred to as the Hellenists into leadership. That's a huge change. And then in chapters 10 and 11, the inclusion of non-Jews, that's right, Gentiles, into the Christian movement. And then in chapters 15, there's the relaxing or making voluntary the majority of Torah law. So these are the three bombshells that happen in the book of Acts that transform the faith from this Jewish sect into this movement that spreads throughout the entire world. Now, without a doubt, each of these was controversial. The Apostle Paul, a latecomer to the leadership of the Christian movement, would lead this movement by expanding the table to allow more and more people, more and more different cultures, access to the faith. Yet, as his letters that make up nearly half of the books of the New Testament make clear, there were intense battles, and the church often was not of one mind. And guess what? The battles within the church continue, and we continue to not be of one mind. The second of these three bombshells, the inclusion of non-Jews or Gentiles into the faith, is shared through the story of Peter and Cornelius. That's what you find in chapters 10 and 11 of the book of Acts. That story begins in the northern part of Caesarea, where a Roman centurion, a soldier, had a vision. And in this vision, an angel tells him that a man named Simon Peter, who is in another port city, Joppa, which is 30 miles to the south, has a message for Cornelius, that he is to invite Peter to come and share a meal with him. So he sends men off. Well, the next day, Peter, who's up in Joppa, he goes up on the roof of where he's staying, and he has this vision. It's short, so we'll just take a look at it. About noon the following day, Peter went up on the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat. And while the meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw heaven opened and something like a large sheet being let down to the earth by its four corners. It contained all kinds of four-footed animals, as well as reptiles and birds. Then a voice told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Surely not me, Lord," Peter replied. "I have never eaten anything impure or unclean." The voice spoke to Peter a second time. "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." So when Cornelius' men arrive, Peter knows that this is of God. Something is happening. So he goes with Cornelius' men to Cornelius' house, and he shares a meal. Yet it's more than just eating non-kosher foods that takes place for Peter. There were numerous laws that prevented Jews and Gentiles from coming together. This is clear from Peter's words to Cornelius and his guest, that he says to them. Peter said to them, "You are well aware," and they were. Everybody knew about the issues that separated Jews and Gentiles. "You are well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate with or visit a Gentile. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean." Realize the scope of what is happening here. 1,500 years of Judaism was tied up in being God's chosen people, the righteous, the people of the law, the people of the covenant. And now Peter's world is going through the biggest tectonic shift imaginable. That whole sense of identity and specialness was being taken away. Why? Because God was much, much bigger and much, much more inclusive than Peter had previously thought God to be. Note the last part of Peter's statement. God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean. When Peter said that, I can't help thinking that he was thinking also about some words of Jesus, actually a portion of that Sermon on the Mount, that echoed these same words from the 7th chapter, where Jesus says to his disciples, Peter was there, "Do not judge, so that you may not be judged. For the judgment you give will be the judgment you get, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how could you say to your neighbor, let me take the speck out of your eye, while the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye." To put it bluntly and crassly, Jesus is saying, focus on your own excrement. That's right. Your own issues. Because that is where sozo, that is where salvation, that is where being made whole, that is where being the person God created you to be is found. That's right. In looking at ourselves. And let other people focus on their own excrement, their own stuff. Because that is where sozo, salvation, being made whole, being the person God created them to be, is to be found for them. We are in a place not unlike Peter's. There is a tectonic shift that is happening in the continental plates that form the terrain that we stand upon. There's a high probability that Roe v. Wade will be overturned in the near future. Now, a good many people will be rejoicing, and a good many people will be grieving. Yeah, we are not of one mind as a country. That's right, by any means. In today's sermon, I'm not going to weigh in so much on the rightness or the wrongness of one side or the other of the issue of abortion. I would hope that each and every one of us engages in that incredibly important discernment, regardless of where you might find yourself currently. However, what I want to focus on is the way we go about engaging in this discernment on this important issue. An issue that goes to the heart of our faith, to the heart of what it means to follow Jesus. I want to begin with what for me are four underlying truths that I'm going to seek to abide by as I wrestle with this issue. And I'm going to lift them up for you to consider. The first underlying truth that I'm going to bring to this is this. Abortion has always been an ambiguous issue among Christians and the Christian church as a whole. Abortion has been something that has happened throughout human history. It's explicitly talked about only in the Old Testament, not in the New. There's really only one Old Testament passage that explicitly addresses abortion. And in that passage, it makes a huge differentiation between the life of the mother and the unborn life that is lost. From Exodus 21, verses 22 to 25. When men have a fight and hurt a pregnant woman so that she suffers a miscarriage, but no further injury, the guilty one shall be fined as much as the woman's husband demands of him, and he shall pay in the presence of the judges. But to the extent that the woman is injured, you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. So yes, abortion is not seen as being in alignment with God's intentions. It's a problem. However, the penalty for causing one is a fine. That's right, a fine. Or you could say the penalty is very different than if the life of the mother, the woman, was taken, which would be murder. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. All right, life for life. This is why Judaism has in modern times been seen as among the most pro-choice religions in the world based on this scripture. Ambiguity on this issue is something that has changed in different ways, sometimes surprising ways, since Roe v. Wade was put in place in 1973. One of the churches that largely blessed Roe v. Wade in 1973, and for a number of years thereafter, did not have any official position on abortion, quite surprisingly, was the Southern Baptist Church. That's right. This is, the Baptist Press is sort of their official publication. And January 31st, 1973, 9 days after Roe v. Wade, this is what they said. This decision of the court advanced the cause of religious liberty, human equality, and justice. And then they said, the Baptist Press article also noted that the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court was not a liberal court, and also noted that there is no official Southern Baptist position on abortion. So, however, the Southern Baptist Church has not always been where it is today. It's in a very, very different place today. Initially, this is where they were. However, there's one church that has consistently and openly opposed abortion from the beginning, and that is the Roman Catholic Church. But that's the only one. In other words, the Catholic Church, unlike the Southern Baptist Church and most other churches, has not been ambiguous with respect to abortion. And yet, the unambiguous position of the Catholic Church has not prevented ambiguity from being very present in the pews. Ireland, one of the most Catholic countries in the world, passed law after law making abortion in nearly every circumstance illegal, very much in alignment with the Catholic Church and their directives. Yet in 2018, in a nationwide referendum vote, 66.4% of Irish voters, the vast majority of them Roman Catholic, voted to legalize abortion in most circumstances based on the choice of the mother. So, again, I repeat, abortion has always been an ambiguous issue among Christians and the Christian church as a whole. Second underlying truth, modern medicine has had an enormous effect upon the perception of abortion by pushing back the survival threshold for prematurely born babies. Less than 100 years ago, 24 weeks, that's right, 24 weeks, just shy of 6 months, was considered the threshold for a preemie baby surviving. Yet with intensive care and advances in medicine, that threshold has been pushed down ever since. It's been pushed down a great deal now, and so the issue of survivability has changed the way we perceive abortion. This whole idea that, the first 6 months, there's no way that this life within could be sustained outside the womb, that has changed, and that's changed our perception. I think it's pretty much inevitable that we are having this intensification of this debate on this issue based partly on this change in technology and medicine. Our understanding of pregnancy and life and survivability practically compels us. And I think regardless of your position on abortion, this is a factor that probably needs to be included. Number 3, don't discount the significance of either gender or the value of personal privacy. As a man, there is much that I will never know about the experience of being pregnant. That doesn't mean that I shouldn't have a voice or a vote on this matter. However, it does mean that essentially one half of the population has limited experiential knowledge on this subject compared to the other half. That's right. I never want to discount this. I never want to assume that somehow I know that which I really do not know on an experiential level. Second, I believe that personal privacy has great value. That's right. Allowing a certain degree of personal privacy is part of valuing each and every human being. There are some personal decisions that the public sector should be very, very careful about taking away. And finally, 4, Jesus is pretty clear about the negative consequences of judging others, playing God, i.e., don't demonize. I, like nearly all of you, have continually struggled with the issue of abortion. And the first 3 underlying truths provide a pretty good reason why I and most of you have struggled with this important issue. That's right. Yet, this one last underlying truth is really the biggest and the most important underlying truth, in my opinion. The more we focus on the issue without judging those who may hold a different opinion, the more we stand a chance of remaining faithful as followers of Jesus. And I believe finding a way forward where we can live not being of one mind on this important issue becomes a possibility. Nearly all of us know really, really good people on both sides of this issue. Most of us know tragic situations as well, related to pregnancy that inform us and lead us in a certain direction. And finally, most of us also know people that have viciously judged people on the other side. Judging happens when we deny the inherent ambiguity that is there. And the ambiguity within the Christian church, which may surprise you as some of the things I share. They surprised me, that are a part of this very difficult moral issue. Judging happens when we are unwilling to deal with a tough issue, and instead we just jump to demonizing a whole group of people. When we shift from the complex and deeply human issue that surrounds this moral issue of abortion, and instead make blanket condemnations of whole groups of people, we are demonizing. Jesus says that we cannot make that judgment of others. That alone is God's prerogative, right? We can't judge other people. I mean, we can't even really judge ourselves. We can't even figure out ourselves to make a definitive judgment on ourselves, and yet somehow we think we can judge other people based upon certain things that we assume about them. To judge is to usurp the power of God. Jesus says bluntly, don't do it. Don't get into the business of judging. In fact, he says something that nearly everyone is aware of. The outcome of judging, this demonizing, is that it will come back upon us, probably even stronger. A deeper dive into why the people of Ireland voted by a 2-1 margin in defiance of their own church to legalize abortion. When you look deeply and listen to what people said, it was they felt that the moral shaming and demonizing of people that was present in their clergy and those who led the pro-life cause is what tipped the scale. It was that arrogance. And so it was counterproductive. Demonizing actually led to the backlash. Demonizing may work in the short run, but in the long run, it will come back in the opposite direction. Jesus notes this boomerang effect. For many years, the pro-life, anti-abortion Christian Civic League in Maine was run by a man named Jasper Wyman. He was the ultimate crusader on this issue. He was expected to see this issue as a war. A war, that's right. And his rhetoric was in alignment with it being a war. He demonized the other side viciously. Yet after years of doing this, something changed for him. Now, he remained as committed to ever to the pro-life cause. but he felt that it had to be achieved in a different way, not by legal means, but by people deciding, freely choosing alternatives to abortion. This idea has spread. And today there is a growing number of people that are something which previously seemed to be incompatible, being both pro-life and pro-choice. What propelled Jasper Wyman was his faith and seeing the destructive effects of judging and demonizing. So that number 4, Jesus is pretty clear about the negative consequences of judging, playing God, i.e., don't demonize. I close with a story, a personal story. It sort of relates to another issue, but it's really about this underlying issue of judging and demonizing and the way we address this issue. Shortly after becoming a DS, I attended a denominational retreat where I connected with a DS from another conference. We shared a lot in common. We were both new DSs. We were both Asbury graduates. We both identified as evangelicals in our respective conferences. We both served predominantly rural districts with lots of folks in our churches on both sides of the issues, but a lot of folks on the conservative side of many issues. He then shared about the intense battles that took place on the floor of his annual conference on homosexuality, same-sex marriage. And he said, I was the evangelical point person for my annual conference. I was the one who led the charge, and I was good at it. I was fierce. I was zealous. I was righteous. I took a no prisoners approach. He shared all of this with a strange undertone of confession. And that undertone caused me to note that everything he said was in the past tense. So I said to him, you're talking in the past tense. Did something change? He said, well, yes and no. He said, I'm still evangelical. I still vote no on changing the book of discipline, but I can't do what I did for so many years. I can't lead the charge. I can't demonize the other side. I asked him, what changed? What changed for you? He said, one day, I was not really praying, not really meditating, just sort of sitting still when a thought came into my mind. I didn't really like it, so I just kind of pushed it aside. But it came back again, and I pushed it aside, and it came back a third time. And he said, that thought changed everything about the way that I deal with people and this issue. I said, what was it? He said, what if I'm wrong? I think all of our goal should be that regardless of whether we're right or wrong on this issue or someone else is right or wrong, do we treat other people in a way that is faithful? I think regardless of whether we're right or wrong on this issue, in some ways will be second to whether or not we're faithful in the way Jesus calls us to engage with one another. This is the good news. Amen.